So I think we're either 9 or 10 days away from where holders of the December gold and silver contracts have to, it goes into delivery at that point. I think it's the 28th of November. This is where you could say instead of the rubber meets the road, it's where paper meets physical. Those who want to stand for delivery can on the 28th. They don't have to do it on the 28th, but this is when typically they'll declare, yes, we're going to stand for delivery. And when you look at gold right now, it's business as usual. You have spot right now. I looked this morning, it was like $1.60, I think, over the December futures contract. And that is classic contango, right? And so you have the futures price is going to be, and actually under the December futures contract, spot is about $1.60 under the December futures contract, which is classic contango. I mean, the banks are trading with other banks, smaller, regional maybe, and also with large hedge funds. And even though, even though you would think that this would be something that should be easy peasy, it's not. And because now it's a lack of trust, it's also a lack of faith in collateral. We've been seeing a lot of subprime and mortgage-backed securities, not subprime, but mortgage-backed securities rather, used as collateral. Now you would do that after you've already, you're doing that because you don't have treasuries or you don't want to trade your treasuries. You're trying to give the collateral that is less than perfect, so they don't trust the collateral and or they don't trust the partners. That is not a good thing because you're trading overnight. You're talking the most liquid, safe, secure trading platform on the planet. You can't get more conservative than trading overnight with the big banks and using a collateral that is either mortgage-backed securities, which are bundled, or the treasuries. And this portrays that the system itself is rotting from underneath. And the big players know this. It's concerning for sure. And I think people should keep a close eye on it.
In a functioning financial landscape, overnight lending is considered routine and risk-free. Today, it's becoming anything but. When the safest market on earth becomes unstable, it is a warning that the foundations of the system may be deteriorating. The issue isn't an isolated liquidity concern. It's the credibility of collateral and counterparties. Once trust erodes within elite market circles, the Federal Reserve often has no choice but to intervene, even if inflation is rising faster than official numbers suggest. This growing fragility sets the stage for cascading impacts across credit markets, banks, and eventually the broader economy.
No, I think you said it well, but if this was a problem of lack of liquidity, it would be less concerning to me than a lack of trust. Trust is a hard thing to get back, and the people at the top see the picture better than anybody. They understand exactly just what kind of clothing the emperor is wearing, I guess you could say. And for them to not trade in what is the most conservative, easy trade you'll ever find overnight because they don't trust the system, it's an indictment not just of the trading partners, but of the liquidity or the solvency of the trading partners and also the value of the collateral. And I think these are two very, very dangerous topics when you talk about what it means. It means that the Fed will typically in this environment be forced to come in and intervene whether they want to or not. And when you already have inflation running much higher than the CPI tells us, we can all feel it with the grocery bills and all of our other bills and our paycheck not going as far. It could really be if you will, the match that lights the fuse, not only to inflation, but the systemic problems that could chain, domino all the way down if they don't step in. So yeah, it's something people should really, really pay close attention to. And if the banks don't want to lend money to other banks, what does it say about keeping your money within a banking system? What does it say about the systemic risks within the banking system itself? I think people should think about that as well. This is one of the things that we've talked about a lot on your show, is just how safe is the banking system with the change to Universal Commercial Code, with the great taking by David Rogers Webb, with being an unsecured general creditor over the FDIC limit. All of these things we've talked about, bail-ins versus bailouts, for a long time, this is how it would start. In essence, this is where the trouble starts before the stocks get wind of it, before the credit markets get wind of it, before the media gets wind of it. It starts right here because you're talking the most well-informed traders on the planet that are making these decisions.
As distrust deepens, unusual signals are emerging from precious metals markets. Gold futures remain in normal contango, but silver is flashing a rare warning, backwardation. This occurs when spot prices rise above futures, an indication of immediate physical demand outpacing available supply. With major delivery periods approaching, investors are willing to pay more for silver today than for future delivery, a move that historically precedes major price shifts. Rapid swings between contango and backwardation signal tight inventories and anxious buyers. These conditions expose underlying stress across global exchanges, especially as countries reduce reliance on U.S. Treasuries and seek tangible reserves.
So I think we're either 9 or 10 days away from where holders of the December gold and silver contracts have to, it goes into delivery at that point. I think it's the 28th of November. This is where you could say instead of the rubber meets the road, it's where paper meets physical. Those who want to stand for delivery can on the 28th. They don't have to do it on the 28th, but this is when typically they'll declare, yes, we're going to stand for delivery. And when you look at gold right now, it's business as usual. You have spot right now. I looked this morning. It was like $1.60, I think, over the December futures contract. And that is classic contango, right? And so you have the futures price is going to be and actually under the December futures contract. Spot is about $1.60 under the December futures contract, which is classic contango, which means the further out you go, you're supposed to pay a higher price, and that takes into account things like storage, interest expense, the cost of money. So in other words, if the spot was 4,100 an ounce, it would be 4101.50, something like that for the December futures contract. As we get much closer to the end of the contract, when you can stand for delivery, it should get narrow and narrow and narrow and get closer to 1-to-1. The further out you go, the larger that contango, the larger that interest expense, the larger the cost of storage. That's normally how it works. So if you go a year out, it may be $25 an ounce more because of the cost of money, the cost of interest, and the people who are betting on it says, yeah, it's going to be $25 higher in a year. That's contango. Backwardation is something you don't see in the metals market very often. It's where the spot price is over the futures price, not under like gold and contango and normal market, but over. And that's backwardation. And it's rare, especially this close to expiration. What it basically says is someone wants physical silver now, not later, and that they see tightness in inventories and immediate demand is outpacing the expected supply. In other words, I don't care what the futures say, I will pay more for it today. I don't want to give you, kind of like what the banks are saying. I don't want to wait one day. This is, I don't want to wait any time at all. I want it right now. And this kind of spread, especially as we get close to expiration, doesn't happen unless something's off. And it usually comes right before a big move in the metals market.
A consistent pattern is emerging. Institutions, governments, and even nations are no longer acting with confidence in the U.S. financial system. Countries like Japan, facing its own currency crisis, have been liquidating treasuries, while others question whether U.S. sanctions could one day target them. This geopolitical distrust reshapes the flow of capital, pushing central banks toward gold, commodities, and other hard assets. Historically, such shifts accompany declining empires, overspending, unsustainable debt, reliance on money printing, and eventual currency weakening. When the world questions America's credibility, every part of the system, from markets to diplomacy, begins to unravel.
So I think it's interesting to see this is what we've been talking about for a long time. Now, for a minute, we saw the market when 50 plus million ounces found their way to London. We saw the market shift from big backwardation as much as $3 an ounce to contango, as it's supposed to be, lasted not more than a day or two, if that. And now all of a sudden we're back in backwardation again. And that just simply says a lack of trust. And this is a theme we see everywhere, whether it be the leaving or the dumping of treasuries by countries like Japan, who has its own problem right now with the $110 billion stimulus package that they're throwing out because the yen is collapsing to a 35-year low. But you're seeing it with, the world doesn't trust our treasury market anymore because of fiscal irresponsibility and sanctions like we did to Russia. And Trump saying a 500% tariff if you support Russian energy purchases. Well, that's not a tariff, that's a sanction. They don't trust us. The banks don't trust each other. And now the exchanges, the players within the biggest exchanges on the planet don't trust each other to the point where they say, nah, I'm going to pay more for it right now than I will for it in the future. That is backwardation. That, again, the theme is no one trusts each other. And that's a problem in a world where everything is based upon trust. And if the trust is eroded, if your wife cheats on you, how long does it take for you, if ever, to get that trust back? Now, that's a bad analogy, but the point is the same. We are a country, we're the good guys. We were based on, a moral high ground and doing the right thing. And you could argue whether it be the constant political bickering, whether it be, the way the world looks at us, being in Iraq, yet passing judgment for 22 years, mind you. We're still there. We never found the weapons, but the way we passed judgment on Russia. Now, I'm not making making a statement on either, but I'm just saying the world looks at us as being hypocritical. And the treasury market based on trust with massive fiscal irresponsibility and countries wondering if they're going to be the next one to be sanctioned, everything seems to be eroding in terms of trust. When trust in institution, in currency, in the judicial system, even all the way up to the Supreme Court. Look at what's happening on the Federal Reserve. We don't trust them anymore either. We're finding the members of the Federal Reserve are doing illegal things that we would go to jail for, but they just get fired from the Federal Reserve. It is a lack of trust across the board, and that is not what strong economies and resiliency is born from. In fact, quite to the contrary, to me, it is far more discouraging and threatening to this system than just about anything else.
As systemic pressures intensify, the wealth gap widens. Those closest to financial power, major institutions, insiders, and policymakers, gain early access to information and liquidity. They accumulate hard assets before inflation fully hits, while the middle class absorbs its full impact. Homeownership, once central to the American dream, is slipping away. Most households can no longer afford a median-priced home, and the average first-time buyer is now around 40 years old. This mirrors historical patterns where rising inequality and weakening purchasing power precede societal resets. The pressures building today are not simply economic, they are deeply structural.
Well, I think, again, it's all, you could argue that it is symptomatic, emblematic of how empires collapse. And lack of trust is right at the top, along with governments overspending, then borrowing to cover the gap. The central banks come in and print to keep it all going. The currency weakens as a result. And what does the smart money do? They move into hard assets. What have we seen across the globe by the central banks? Oh, they're moving into hard assets. What are the Chinese doing? Moving into hard assets. Who gets crushed every time? The middle class. And then the system resets because mathematics demand it. And along the way, you're going to see the rot come up from the bottom. And who are the winners in all of this? They're the ones that are always closest to the money printer or the information. That is the Cantillon effect. And that is the people closest to the information and closest to the money benefit disproportionately because of all of the money printing. These people, they know the information, they buy the assets before everyone else figures it out. They're closest to the money, meaning they have a lot of money and they're able to take advantage of the inflation. They buy assets, their assets go way up, and the rest of the world, the middle class, gets creamed. Right now, 75% of U.S. households cannot afford a median price house in this country. And the median age for a first-time home buyer is now 40 years old, the highest on record.
Trust is the cornerstone of any stable society, and it is breaking down across the board. Public confidence in government, central banks, media, the legal system, and financial institutions is near historic lows. Scandals involving Federal Reserve officials, political insiders, and policymakers reinforce perceptions of hypocrisy and unequal accountability. As described in works like The Fourth Turning, societies enter turbulent periods when institutional credibility collapses. Today's environment reflects that pattern, eroding moral authority, inconsistent global leadership, and widening disillusionment. When trust disappears, financial systems fracture, currencies weaken, and nations face the possibility of profound transformation.
And so when you talk about the American dream, it's slipping away because of this rot. And I think as this problem accentuates, you'll see much more of this. We've already seen 2 or 3 of the members of the Federal Reserve be kicked off, or the second one right now is, or the third one right now is under investigation. But this is, look at what's her name, Nancy Pelosi, and evidently Paul Pelosi is the greatest investor on the planet. And all of these things are happening, at a time where things are systematically changing. I think you should expect to probably see a lot more of it. And that's just the way cycles repeat. And unfortunately, I think, read the book, The Fourth Turning, we're getting to that point where every pillar of trust in American life, government, media, medicine, law enforcement, the Federal Reserve, the Supreme Court, it's all unraveling. And, the system's authority, to your point, is eroding from within. And I would say that, the moral authority that I mentioned, we were the good guys who rebuilt the world and championed democracy, but that moral high ground is disappearing, done again, and it's undermined by hypocrisy. And we're a preach a rules-based order while breaking those same rules ourselves and punishing other nations for actions we take too. The world notices, and the people up in the government who break the promises and break the rules, well, they just get slapped on the wrist and move along. I think the world is no longer buying the story. And I think that's what this is all emblematic of all over the place, whether it be the banks, the institutions, government, or, the people running the show on all levels. That's a problem when the whole gig is based upon trust and no one trusts us anymore. It's not a good thing.